photographer, welcome back to my channel. It's Belinda and this is where we talk all about photography, from inspiration to camera techniques to editing skills so that you could take better photos. Now today in this episode we are talking about photography sales techniques. I am going to walk you through how a photography meeting typically goes, and also I'm going to give you 3 things to pay attention to when you're meeting with a client. Now this video is specifically about how you behave and what to say when you're in a meeting room with a potential client. But if you're interested in knowing more as well about how you promote your business in general and how you market to a mass audience, head over to my blog where I give more detail in relation to how you make use of different social media platforms to market your business and to put yourself out there really. Alright, so let's dive right in. Now the first tip I have for you corresponds to the preparation stage. That is the kind of work that you have to do before you even walk into the conference room with your client. In relation to this, you will need to know who you're trying to come across as in the meeting. You need to know the personality that you're trying to present to the client. And this comes first for a very good reason. Most clients actually care about your personality way more than anything else. They actually care more about whether or not you're easy to work with and whether or not you're friendly versus what gear you're shooting on, how many years of experience you have, who have you previously worked for, and what's the quality of your work. I actually have personally been told by a client that if they were to look for a photographer who had the perfect techniques, they wouldn't even have considered me because they already have a bunch of contacts that could do stellar work on a technical level. So the takeaway from this experience is that basically you can't expect to differentiate yourself just based solely on your techniques, on your skill set as a photographer, because that's pretty much a prerequisite. Everyone is expected to be able to take decent pictures before the client even considers seeing them. So what really makes a difference is the personality, whether or not the client sees themselves working with you, whether or not they see that you are a good match for their needs. So now this is why it is so important to know who you are before you even walk into the client meeting, because you need to know this persona that you're trying to project before you can actually embody those qualities. So to give you some examples, I personally think that my edge would lie in strong business acumen. I know what they're using these photos for, and that's why I know how to tailor my photography to further their ends for their marketing purposes. That is one. I come across as a really genuine and reliable person and honest, in my dealings. And lastly, I care about their genuine interests. I put their interests at heart. These are some examples of how I conceptualize this personality that I want them to feel about me. That is why I don't even need to think about what to say and what not to say, because myself sells for itself. On to the next tip, which is to get them to talk as much as possible. Now, you might ask, so how much exactly is much? Apparently, there wouldn't be one straightforward answer as to how many % of the time you will have to speak. And it also depends on your personality. I'm going to share with you what I personally do. So I don't talk about myself unless they explicitly ask me to. For example, if they ask me a direct question about what gear are you shooting on, then I would say, yeah, I shoot on a Canon 5D Mark IV. Or if they're asking for a very specific portfolio that they want to see, then of course I'm gonna show it to them and to give them some simple description of what I have been doing. But other than that, I don't really deliberately take time to talk about myself just for the sake of telling them. I mostly just go with the flow and add a few remarks here and there if I see it relevant. Now at this point, I would like to take some time to talk about the human psychology, because honestly, the art of selling isn't really about what you're selling and what you're saying. It's actually more about how well you know the human psychology and how you play according to it. As a matter of fact, we all like to talk about ourselves. We like people who let us talk. That sounds quite counterintuitive to the act of selling, because the word selling suggests that you have to be the active person who gives information and to do the persuasion. If you know the human psychology, this will help you do the persuasion automatically. If you let your clients speak, they feel better about themselves. And because they feel better about themselves, they come out of that meeting feeling better about that meeting. And that's why you should encourage them to talk about themselves. Okay, so that's about the psychological side of things. And now on to the strategic point of view. Think about it. If this deal is to come to a close in the future, you probably will go through some negotiation between you and a client about the rates. They might get you to do a discount and you might, defend your position, whatever that may be. But in this entire bartering process, what gives you the edge to charge more? It is the fact that you have what they're looking for. If unfortunately you don't have what they're looking for, or that you fail to demonstrate to them that you have what they're looking for, then this puts you at a weaker position to negotiate prices because your services will be viewed as less valuable to them. In order to find out what they're actually looking for in you, you will need to ask a lot of questions that you will need to gauge based on their response. So that is why you need to get them to talk as much as possible, to gather as much information as possible so that you could logically deduce what is that most important thing that they want from you. This is how you have the bargaining power to charge for better rates. The last thing that I think applies to me personally is the fact that this is part of my personality. I like to listen and I like to take people's interests at heart. I want the best for them. So this is also a way in which I show my personality. I want to know more about you so that I know how to serve your needs best. Alright, so the first tip has to do with the preparation work before you go see a client. The second tip has to do with what to do and what to say during the meeting. And the third tip here, I'm going to tell you how to properly close off a meeting. And in order to do this, you will need to get your client to show some sign of commitment within the meeting before you leave the meeting room. Typically, you start off the meeting by some small talk. You talk about random stuff like the weather, the politics, and just generally life. And then you move on to talk about photography, which is something more serious and more to the matter. And then you gradually move on again to talk about some more casual topics like COVID, let's say, and working from home and the business economy and the market and stuff like that. That helps you to know each other a bit more outside of work, so as to build a personal relationship. This part of the conversation can go on and on and on to a point where you forget kind of why are you in this meeting in the first place. And once the meeting has to come to an end, you walk away from the meeting without getting each other to commit to some things. Now this is a huge mistake to avoid. Since everyone has just gathered a lot of information during the meeting, they will usually need to take some time and to think things through, make more other considerations, and there probably are some things that both parties will need to further provide each other with. For example, the photographer will need to talk about the quotes and the pricing, whereas the clients might need to do a bit more research on what they actually want and give a clearer scope of work to the photographer. Like, you can't expect the deal to close right in the meeting. And because of this, if you don't get the client to come up with some sort of timeline and some sort of next steps to show that they are committed, you are literally walking away without knowing what's going to happen, and that is not an ideal situation to be in. That's why as you close off the meeting, always remember to drive the flow of the conversation back to say, okay, what's the next step? What am I expecting from you at what time frame? This helps you gauge how well you have given the pitch, how well you have sold, whether or not the client is likely to work with you. And these are some important information that allows you to succeed as a photographer. Alright, so that was the most important 3 things in my opinion in relation to how you sell and how you behave in a meeting with a photography client. If you want some tips on how you generally market your photography business and how you promote yourself as a photographer, head over to my blog article where I give way more detail in how to do that. Now, if you enjoy what I've been doing, hit like, subscribe, hit the bell as well, because this helps support my YouTube channel massively. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye!